out is called the comprador. Comprador is a French word meaning agent, agent of. Therefore, we, the raw materials producers, need to conduct internal struggles in our respective countries to add value to these raw materials, including coffee, so that we earn more from our sweat and create more jobs for our youth instead of dying in the Mediterranean going to Europe. We also need to sensitize our partners in the countries that have been buying our raw materials at same slave prices, that their economics is defective. What will the USA or Europe or Asia lose if Africa sells added value coffee to them instead of the raw materials of the raw material form and earn more money? What if the value addition is done to other raw materials like copper, gold, iron ore, lithium, etc.? Money to Africa will mean higher purchasing power for Africa. The Africans who now lack electricity will be able to afford to pay for electricity. Where will the turbines come from, the ones for generating the electricity? Will they not come from Europe, USA, Russia, China, or from other partners? So what we are proposing by adding value to our raw materials will mean putting more purchasing power in the hands of the Africans. But there is a page, I jumped in my speech. Allow me not to leave it out. Now, because of this hemorrhage from Africa, because of these raw materials, that's why the economy of Africa is stunted. African economy is stunted. I had jumped this, very sorry, very sorry. That's why the economy of Africa is stunted. Somebody from stunted growth is somebody who can't grow. The GDP of the whole massive African continent, with a population now of about 1.5 billion people, is US dollars 2.7 trillion. What are the GDP sizes of other much smaller individual countries? Here below are some examples. USA, 25.5 trillion. Africa, 2.7 trillion. USA, 25 trillion. China, 17.9 trillion, almost 18 trillion. Japan, $4.2 trillion. Germany, $4 trillion. India, $3.38 trillion. Even little South Korea has a GDP of US dollars 1.7 trillion, nearing the size of the African GDP. It must be pointed out that even this US dollars 2.7 trillion is a recent development because the African economies are said to be growing at a fast rate compared to others in the world. Otherwise, Africa's GDP was only 500 billion some few years ago. However, much of that growth may be quantitative, not qualitative, producing more and more raw materials. Sorry, I had jumped that page in the speech. Therefore, as I conclude, I was beginning to ask the question, if Africa gets more money from value-added products of its raw materials, will it not be better for the whole world? Because if you hear the per capita consumption of electricity in Uganda is 300. In the USA, it is 12,000. Why are the Ugandans not using electricity? Because, first of all, in the past it was not there. But even when it's there, they may not be able to afford it. But if they get income, because they are getting more money from their coffee, getting more money from their iron ore, getting more money from their copper, they will be able to buy electricity. And we shall be able to generate more electricity. Where will the turbines for generating that electricity be coming from? Uganda is not making turbines yet. We shall have to buy them from those people. So therefore, that's why I was asking, the question was, how can greed obscure rationality to such an extent? Why can't people see what is good for all of us? In conclusion, I propose to say that global affluence will benefit everybody. Down with imperialism, down with the parasitism, long live the win-win strategy. With these not so few words, I declare the conference open. Thank you very much.
You've paused. Thank you once again. With your permission, Excellency, we're now going to go into a session of brief statements from their excellencies and heads of delegations. We'll have a statement from His Excellency Dr. Girma, the chairman of the Inter-African COF organization. Your Excellency, we have the Inter-African COF organization where the G-25 meet to share experience and collectively plan to act together. Your Excellency, you're welcome.
Your Excellency, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Your Excellency Sahle-Work Zewde, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency Dr. Phillips Dor Mapango, Vice President of United Republic of Tanzania, Your Excellency Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary, Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency Vice President of Uganda, Your Excellency Ambassador Joseph Asako, AU Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment, Honorable Ministers, Ambassadors, representatives of development partners, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, all protocols observed. On behalf of member states of the Inter-African Coffee Organization and the Ministry of Agriculture of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, I would like to convey our appreciation and gratitude to His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni and his government for hosting the second G-25 African Coffee Summit here in Kampala under the theme Transformation of the African Coffee Sector through Value Addition. I would also like to thank the head of states, governments, ministers, and distinguished delegates for your presence here today. This is a testament to solidarity and commitment to pursue our common goal to find solutions for the development of the African coffee sector. For centuries, coffee has been a source of inspiration, a catalyst for conversation, and a symbol of hospitality. Moreover, it has been a valuable economic commodity that supports the livelihoods of millions in our continent. The G25 African Coffee Summit was created on 18 November 2021 under the auspices of the Inter-African Coffee Organization to reevaluate the overall performance of the coffee sector in Africa. Following the first G25 African Coffee Summit held in Nairobi last year, some progresses have been registered, though works are ongoing. Some of those instances of ongoing works are: 1, the Nairobi Declaration has been submitted to the African Union Commission and is waiting to be adopted by the AU Special Technical Committee for presentation to the AU Heads of State Assembly for approval and inclusion in the AU Agenda 2063. 2, the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Organization for Standardization has set up committees to promote value addition and harmonize coffee standards that are required for interregional Africa trade, and the new IACO agreement is in its final phase for ratification, which is expected to bring together all the African coffee producers, consumer states, and the private sector under a unified platform. Third, several coffee houses and training institutes have been opened in member states together with cupping sessions, barista championships, which have led to more coffee awareness and job opportunities for youth. I would like to appreciate the work being done by the Secretariat and commend the leaders of the G25 member states for their commitment to come together to find common grounds on the regional challenges facing the African coffee sector. Excellencies, Africa now has the political will and legal instruments, such as the historical African Continental Free Trade Area, which is the world's largest free trade area, bringing together the 55 countries of the African Union and 8 regional economic communities. In addition, AU's flagship project in the African Union Agenda 2063, aimed at building transport infrastructure, air and rail, combined with the Nairobi Declaration that demanded the inclusion of coffee as a strategic crop in the AU's Agenda 2063, are expected to open a lot of opportunities for the development and empowerment of youth and women across the value chain. Aside from the fact that Africa is the birthplace for coffee, Robusta coffee in Uganda and Arabica coffee in Ethiopia, the livelihood of at least 60 million people across the continent, it only accounts for 12% of the world's coffee production. There is also huge inequality in the value chain, as it is already indicated by His Excellency the President, which could be explained by the fact that Africa obtained only 0.6% out of the total value chain globally generated in 2023. One of the reasons for the inequality is that 99% of the value chain of coffee produced on the African continent is being captured abroad. Africa is operating at the low end of the supply chain as a green bean exporter. This is due to a number of factors that include lack of investment in the processing plants, technology, and low level of coffee consumption culture, among others. Promisingly, over the last 2 decades, domestic consumption has been an increasing trend in the continent. However, sadly, this demand has been served predominantly through the importation of processed coffee from abroad. This is optimal for Africa because it is increasing the import bill and making coffee consumption within Africa more expensive. Excellencies, there are 2 factors inhibiting the full implementation of the Inter-African Continental Free Trade Agreement, namely infrastructure and lack of investment in the value addition. For instance, Nigeria, with a population of 221 million, almost similar to Brazil, has a huge untapped market and could serve to lack of adequate infrastructure. Coffee export to Nigeria by ship can take maybe more than 7 months. Another prime example in South Africa, which has huge potential for African coffee, but it imports primarily from Brazil and Europe. This is the trend in many of our African countries facing logistical and infrastructural barriers. Currently, it is quicker and easier for our producers to ship coffee to Europe, but sadly at a very cheap price. Excellencies, allow me to underscore the following key areas that need addressing to overcome some of these barriers. 1, there is a need for consensus from African leaders to support the adoption of coffee as a strategic crop in the AU's Agricultural Agenda 2063 as the next meeting 2024. 2, to capture the 99% of value addition, the G-25 African producing countries need a strategy to create public-private partnerships to fund and support investment in value through vocational trainings for the youth and women. 3, Africa has huge potential to increase production drastically. There are lessons to be learned and scaled up from countries that have successfully implemented their national initiatives and boosted production, like what is mentioned in Uganda by His Excellency the President. As part of our motto, Africa Solutions to Africa Problems, we have now enough experience and best practices that can be scaled up and shared with one another without going to other continents. 4, it is important that we harmonize the African Continental Free Trade Agreement framework in collaboration with the African Standard Organization and the African Union Digital Platform. Lastly, the flagship projects of the African Agenda 2063, such as the Single African Air Transport Market, this is critical to accessing new markets and facilitating the African coffee producers to trade seamlessly within the continent. Excellencies, as the Inter-Africa Coffee Organization, we remain optimistic on the future growth of the coffee industry. There are abundant opportunities that need to be unlocked in Africa. We have estimated at 700 million below the age of 30 years. Unemployment is driving our youth to take dangerous journeys to migrate to Europe, when we have huge potential to make Africa self-sufficient and create employment for the youth and empower women. Once again, I congratulate His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and all leaders gathered here today for their commitment to an integrated Africa for equitable and sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Organization will continue to receive more brief statements. Her Excellency Saleh Wak Zewedi, the President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, Madam Vice President of Uganda, Your Excellency, my sister, Excellency, the Vice President of Tanzania, Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary of Kenya, my brother Musalia Mudavadi, the Chairman of the Inter-African Coffee Organization and Minister of Agriculture of Ethiopia, distinguished participants, my sister, the African Union Commissioner, Joseph Asako, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by extending my heartfelt gratitude to the government and the people of Uganda for their warm welcome and well-known hospitality accorded to me and to my delegation since our arrival in Kampala. I'm here today because we strongly believe that our in-person presence and participation at this important summit convened by Uganda provide an opportunity to keep and accelerate the momentum and is unique to deliberate on the many challenges facing the coffee sector in Africa. Possible solutions. I'm here also because we believe, really strongly believe, in collective action for us to occupy our rightful space in the global market. Despite being one of the most traded commodities globally and consumed virtually by people of all cultures and religions around the globe, coffee didn't receive the proper attention it deserves compared to even some less traded commodities. While this is partly due to the weak bargaining power of the very producers, the poor farmers, it's in part due to the lack of strong organizations committed to work on behalf and for the benefit of the producers and exporters. Filling these serious gaps should be the aim and priority of the Inter-African Coffee Organization. I believe this second G-25 summit will encourage such a mandate. The poor farmers sweat to produce and supply best quality coffee to the international market. But it is the traders who decide the international coffee price in the absence of the producers or their rightful representation. The very producers are price takers and remain at the receiving end throughout the market chain. We all must work to end this market unfairness together. With just simple value addition, it's possible to increase the benefit of smallholder farmers and enable them to get fair share of their efforts. It is important to promote African coffee at the global market and invest in national trading companies to support the producing farmers technically and financially. Although 25 countries of Africa produce coffee and 60% of their people's livelihood depend on this production, their contribution to the international market in value terms is really insignificant. Ethiopia, it's not just the origin place of Arabica, as is Uganda for Robusta. It is the largest, best quality organic Arabica coffee producer and exporter in Africa, and among the top. With a number of distinct varieties and unique characteristics, coffee is the most consumed and colorfully celebrated commodity in Ethiopia, with, of course, unique coffee making process. Coffee accounts the largest part of Ethiopia's export earnings of agricultural products and employs millions of direct and indirect jobs. Ethiopia has a potential of more than 1.2 million hectares of land for coffee growing, out of which more than been covered by coffee trees. To encourage investments in coffee, provides investors income tax exemption of up to